To people here. All right. Well, thank you for joining me here, Allan. I do appreciate that. We'll kind of give people a quick little minute. Give people a quick minute to join in here. Do a little notification for everybody here. To talk about ShinyLib. All right. Cool. Notification is out. Anyway, so you have been working on Shiny 2.0 for how long?
A while.
Now? Just a while?
Yeah, just a while. I take my time.
Slow. You're so slow. Come on. You're killing everybody. Taking so long.
Yeah, I know. You should see the amount of emails I get asking for when 2.0 is going to come out. And the amount of support requests for the previews. It's pretty crazy.
I can certainly believe that. So tell me a little bit, or tell everybody, I guess. Like Shiny 1.0 has been out for 1.x, really, right? Because I think stable is what, 1.2?
Yep.
So that Shiny 1.x has been out for a while now, and 2.0 that seems like a big change. So tell us, like, what is making Shiny 2.0 so special? What are the big changes? What are the things that we have to kind of look forward to here?
So Shiny 2.0 was kind of was a cleanup. I removed a lot of kind of the excess and overlap with essentials, other than the stuff that Shiny needed, like connectivity and power management and stuff, because that's used under the hood. For the most part, the core will look the same to everybody. So if you've used jobs and kind of the connectivity services and stuff, they haven't changed.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, your personal favorite settings or the object binding.
We'll probably talk about. It's my favorite, but
it's one of them. It's one of them. I'd say you were the big proponent of getting it. So that changed a little bit, which we can discuss today.
Yeah.
That was just an easy way of binding your key store or your encrypted, what are we calling that? Secure storage settings, or any other number of things to an object or a view model in this case, and having it reflect, to and from that store. Yeah. So that took a big, massive upgrade in this release. There was also probably one of the key problems that Shiny 1.0 had was the amount of boilerplate you had to hook in. It's kind of a Xamarin problem in general with plugins, and even Forms has to have a lot of hooks to get in there, and so does Essentials. And it was probably the worst support that I had to do, because everything that came in said, "Oh, this doesn't work." But the fact is that 9 out of 10 times it was just missing boilerplate. And people really were missing that stuff and saying Shiny doesn't work, but you're missing kind of a key aspect of it. So Shiny 2.0 and kind of the C#9 .NET 5 release, even though you don't need .NET 5 or C#9, the Codegens came out, or source generators came out. And I started to, we were both experimenting with the Uno first generation, but now that it's on the official channel, I took advantage of those. So I'm actually doing all the Codegen of all the boilerplate for Android and iOS now. So I'm hoping, knock on wood, that cuts down on the support and the amount of things that people need to know to get going. So that was one of the big deliverables.
That's awesome. It's awesome. And you changed the startup a little bit as well, right? So the signature of iStartup changes. That was a breaking change that I noticed as I've been playing with it.
It was really a minor change. It's one that I'm not sure. It was necessary, at least for a project I had it in, where a specific API only had to be registered on a specific platform. And I was able to do it in a cross-platform way. So I decided, you know what, let's put the platform through. Because if you look at kind of ASP.NET, they've got ways to check the environment and configuration at that point, where Shiny doesn't really have that.
Sure.
So putting the platform through the startup seemed like a logical next step. And it just kind of, it also made sense because with logging, that was another big change that occurred in 2.0 was I took a dependency on Microsoft extensions, the logging framework, which that's going to be pretty epic because that saves me and a lot of other people a lot of plug-in time for getting logging built in.
You mean you don't want to reinvent the wheel every project?
No, I had a custom logger in there for a while. And it was necessary because when background jobs crash, how do you catch them, right? Like, how do you catch those errors? Where do you store them? It's still a massive problem today. People miss, they're like, well, it's not working. Well, no, it's that you're throwing an exception and I'm logging it in the background. So Shiny had to have a logger out of the gate, but people just weren't using it. And it wasn't really well documented what to do with it. I think a lot of people are just writing try catches in their job and thinking it should come out in the console, because I've seen that happen a bunch of times. And that's not going to happen, right? Because you don't have a debugger or a console hooked up when your jobs are running most of the time. So it was important to get that in, but kind of next step to logging was also bringing in, the mobile world of logging, which was App Center and Firebase analytics to maybe a lesser degree in the Xamarin world. So I've also added kind of integration points for those with 2.0.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know it's definitely been pretty helpful because there are just like a few platform things. Like you actually have like the IPlatform, which tells you a little bit more than just like which platform you're on. As I recall, there was like your cache directory and stuff like that. Like certain directories that you may want, like when you're setting up something like your SQLite database, right? Like here's where I want this to be. So super, super helpful.
There's kind of an amalgamation of all things. I know in Essentials, they keep them all separate.
Yeah.
What I found is that I was injecting all these services everywhere for a lot of the Shiny services. And I really don't need them all. I just need like one combined. This is how the platform works. Here you go. And that kind of really cleaned things up as I went through 2.0.
Yeah, no, it's really awesome. So you have some stuff that you wanted to share with us today. So I'll go ahead and throw your screen up here.
Okay.
And you can kind of walk us through. So what do you have here? I mean, besides obviously an Android application.
Yeah, so I'm going to look at kind of the boilerplate that we've been writing for the last, I guess, year and a half. Shiny kind of brought in this idea of using the Android application, which I know a lot of people don't understand. They're used to seeing this guy. This is the main activity. This is kind of a standard main activity that you get with Xamarin Forms. And this has kind of got the Shiny hooks in it as well, as well as Essentials. Essentials hooks on all these things as well. So it's a lot. It's a lot to plug in. And it's a lot to remember. But this was something that wasn't done in Forms or even like Prism, because you guys kind of hook off of Xamarin Forms as well, right? So
yeah,
a lot of people didn't understand.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I always just added the application even with Essentials, because you can hook Essentials off the application, and it's a little bit better, I think, than doing it off main activity.
Well, it's necessary, and a lot of people don't understand that. Like your broadcast receivers and your Android services, they may run without your activity ever kicking off. So a lot of DI frameworks and Xamarin Forms itself got going right here. But when this is running in the background, the only thing that runs before all of those is the application. So I needed a way to get DI and all the Shiny services going before it ever got to Forms. Like Xamarin Forms may never enter the equation in terms of Shiny background jobs. So this is why it needed to separate. And this is also why I needed something to go one level higher than your main activity. So thus the introduction of the Android application. Again, this was things that people were missing every single time, or they didn't understand it, or they didn't think they'd need it. I've seen people use the main activity and then use the application off of that to initialize Shiny. So again, nothing but problems. trying to explain how to set things up. And there was also this constructor, which people would miss. This isn't because of Shiny. This is because of Xamarin. It's just something you need to get the bloody app going. Because they pass through this stuff. And if it's not there, your app doesn't start. It just basically crashes the second it starts up. There's no logging it, nothing. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, that's a fun one for sure.
Yeah, and I've missed it myself. I mean, I've been like, oh yeah, I need to have the constructor in there because my app isn't starting.
Yep.
And you go through and you panic, and then you just have to go through it logically and go, oh, okay. So this was obviously a big kind of pain point for support. I think it was just constant. 9 out of 10 issues were always around this stuff. And then just for sake, we'll do iOS as well, because that was another big one. In fact, iOS in some cases is a little bit bigger. So this is just kind of the standard iOS Xamarin Forms app delegate, right? I haven't even really modified this. This is kind of out of the box for what they have.
The modification is just all of your hooks there for Shiny. Yeah.
Yeah, and this was the thing too, is that you needed to do different hooks based on what plugins you were using from Shiny. So if you were using the background uploads and downloads, you needed this guy. And then you needed to know what method to call. If you wanted to run jobs, now this one isn't as necessary anymore, but you needed to do perform fetch, call the job manager, etc. And then if you're using any of the push mechanisms, you needed to hook all 3 of these guys to get it working. So it was kind of a hassle because you had to document all of these at separate places and different plugins were using it. So I kind of merged them just all into these extension methods. But again, it requires the user to know, what am I hooking when? So it wasn't a good setup. So with 2.0, I wanted to have essentially this. This is what I wanted. And then I wanted to get rid of this guy. Just delete him. And then get rid of all of this stuff too. So this is what I set out to do in 2.0, was to eliminate basically all of the boilerplate. 100% of it, even the forms and essential stuff, I wanted it all to go. And with one magical attribute, which it kind of snuck up on the screen there, I didn't put it down far enough. We'll bring this guy up, and all you basically have to do is tell Shiny how it's initializing your application, and it's going to Codegen that for us. I basically have to give it the name of my startup class, the full kind of namespace and startup file name, and then your Xamarin Forms app type name, again, fully qualified. And then basically when I run the compile now, assuming the Visual Studio doesn't give me a hard time, because it does that on occasion.
No, never does that.
See, it failed. It always happens during a live broadcast. Well, what failed? Apparently nothing failed because there's no errors. But this generally happens the first time. If you don't restart, etc., you got to go through it and go, oh, what failed? It's probably
really that's that's like a Visual Studio issue I've noticed with Codegen. It's not like an MS build. So in CI, it just works. Yeah. In Visual Studio, it freaks out the first time, and then when you open it back up, it's like, oh, okay, fine.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's just one of the kind of the problems we have. But I'll pull up the generated stuff. It did generate the code. Yeah. So I've got this actively set to compile. So I'll bring over this. So this is what it actually went and generated. This is in a separate directory from the build. So you can see it initialized essentials. It initialized the Shiny stuff. It created that constructor. So all is good in the world. And then we'll show the main activity. So the main activity, it's not as pretty looking. Codegen stuff is often ugly looking. But it went and created all of that stuff. It created Xamarin Forms. It created the Shiny hooks. It even created some of the third-party stuff. Like if anybody's used XF Material, I saw that was kind of in the reference path and initialized that for the user as well. So it's all there. You don't have to do any of that extra init stuff. And then last but not least, the app delegate. So this is what it went and created. So it saw, And the good thing is that it doesn't just create these blindly. Like it's looking, do you have a push notification plugin? If so, I'll go and generate these guys for you. It doesn't just assume that it's there and just does a dump of code. It checks all this stuff.
So it basically, it read the docs, so you don't have to.
Exactly. It checks all your plugins, all your NuGets, and says, oh, you are using push. So you know what? I'm going to generate the push overrides, the perform fetch, and the handle events because you've got them installed. And basically, we can see them right here. So there's ShinyNet HTTP, which is part of the events. So it's that guy. What else?
So this is like so simple. Even Brian Lagunas could do it.
I'm not sure how he hasn't come to kill you yet, Dan. But...
Oh, he's in chat.
Yeah, I see. He asked us to start over.
Yeah. That's why I ignored him.
So it's going to go ahead and generate all this stuff. So I'm hoping that this is going to be a big thing come 2.0, is that this should relieve a lot of stress and support that I have to deal with. It does also do the startup, but it's very limited as to what it generates for the startup, because there's a lot of arguments that are needed in kind of the startup. Like if you're using notifications, let's say, all these sensor things, beacon monitoring, all that stuff, it goes and finds a lot of this stuff and it'll hook it up automatically for you. But stuff like Azure notification hubs, I'm just going to give it something stupid. There's like extra arguments that are needed here. So it can't automatically determine these things to hook them up for you.
You mean it doesn't just know my connection string?
No.
My hub name? Why not?
What's that?
So like you need to make this smarter so it knows my connection string.
Well,
why should I have to track that? I mean, come on.
Well, I guess I could hack into your secrets file and pull that for you. But it seemed like an excessive amount of work to do something that I think people can do for themselves.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you also have the other problem, right? So with Codegen, it's kind of, either you're codegenning or they're writing the code, right?
Exactly.
So, if I'm adding, a service, like it doesn't matter what service it is. If I'm adding a service in there, you can't use Codegen to add configure services. So, your only real method, and I've had to do this with Prism Magician, is in order to kind of get these things to play well together, is I have to just recognize, hey, you already wrote this method, so I'm going to Codegen another method, and then I'm going to use some IL weaving to call that method. And that's a huge headache. I don't recommend it.
Codegen is obviously I feel like it's not fully baked yet either.
No, it's not. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for WPF actually.
Oh, I didn't know that at all. I don't really touch WPF anymore. It's like 20 years removed for me, but
yeah. I had like a really fun thing where I was like, okay, cool. Well, I'm going to simplify just a hot mess for a project I was working on, and we're going to bring in some Codegen. Because basically what they were doing was all reflection lookups, right? And it was like, let's speed this up. Let's do this at build instead of runtime. And so I brought in the Roslyn generators because I'm like, hey, why not? It doesn't work with WPF. Whoops. So I had to start. Well, I had to massage it a little bit and use Uno, because Uno's Codegen does actually work for WPF. But apparently the Roslyn team has never heard of WPF before.
Well, it's kind of one of those old things. I'm hoping with Project Reunion and stuff that a lot of those things tend to come back and kick in and modernize the platforms, even for WinForms who for whoever is still using it. Because it does help, right? Well, I mean, like even DI, I think we'll probably see DI and JSON serialization take a big change with source gen as soon as we kind of all get our crap together and start using them properly.
Oh, for sure. I mean, if you look at, we can talk about this because .NET MAUI, it's all open source. They're doing this in the open. So I mean, they can't really NDA something that's open source. But you go take a look at that repo, you go pull down the MAUI samples, and what do you have? You have a new app architecture for MAUI that's interface based with dependency injection. Same thing that you and Brian and myself have been telling them that should be done for years.
Yeah, well, it takes time to catch up. I'm kind of glad they're taking that direction because it really kind of aligns with ASP.NET.
Oh, for sure.
But I think they've known that they had to do it for years, but they needed kind of a solid UI framework, and they kind of really needed to figure out what the community was looking for. And I think they're on that path now. And I know kind of Blazor followed that pattern as well with their DI. So,
I mean, Blazor is really just an ASP.NET application. So,
yeah, So it was a good solid way for them to merge all of those application frameworks, because I think for the next few years we're going to be like, do I write Blazor? Do I write Xamarin Forms? Do I write MAUI? I have no idea. I mean, it's going to be Blazor and MAUI to some degree. So it would be nice to have some sort of unified model. So them adding dependency injection, I think, was a great thing overall for everybody.
Definitely. Awesome. All right. So we have this source generation, which I love. And show us like a little bit like, so we have this new signature. It's that configure services that we were talking about earlier, that you change the signature where if you're used to using Shiny 1.x, right? Like it's just iService collection is the only argument that gets passed in. So the breaking changes that you now have this second argument for iPlatform.
Yep.
So I know we've talked about it a little bit, but go ahead and maybe show us a little bit about like what that accomplishes. Is like give some people some ideas on how they can use that.
So a lot of things like SQL, yours was the SQLite connection string was based on giving it. Basically, everybody ends up doing the same code. We'll just kind of write it really quickly here. You might do, so you're bringing system.io. You want to put this in your app data directory. So we'll do full name, and then we'll give it a path like mydb.db3 or whatever. So this ended up being used everywhere. Sure, you could inject your SQLite connection yourself, like make it an actual service, but a lot of people were doing this where, I guess I'll have to bring in SQLite. Hang on. We'll bring in SQLite PCL.NET. And did I type that wrong? Is it SQLite? It's SQLite net. I always get them backwards.
Yeah.
That's the guy I'm looking for. So a lot of people just wanted to do new SQLite async connection and just kind of give it the connection string right here. Here we go. And they might inject this, obviously with Shiny, you probably want to put this in your path. So I might do add singleton, and there we go. Like you've got it out of the gate. And now this SQLite connection can be used throughout your services if you wanted to. So that was part of the thinking. The main one for me, like I said, was checking if this platform is Android, iOS, etc. Now it's a bit of a hack how I do that, because I'm basically just checking the type name on it. But there's a lot of things in platform you may want to use at this startup point, aside from just the paths, etc. But it's very minor for why it's there, but it's necessary why it's there.
Now, have you thought about like having like a enum or something that you can check for that platform type? Or
I knew you were going to bring that up, Dan.
Of course.
That's something you've been asking for. I have, but I don't want to yet. Let's put it that way.
So maybe we got to hold out hope for 2.1. Is that what you're saying?
Maybe.
Okay.
I'm kind of waiting to see, because I think a lot of the startup stuff is going to change come MAUI timeframe. So I didn't want to go too
It's gonna get
crazy on the
interesting.
platform stuff just yet, just to see how kind of the stones fall come September, October timeframe. And then we'll see what happens to the signature then.
Yeah, it's funny. So with Easter, I ended up with like a 4-day weekend, which almost never happens. And it was like, let me do a little spike here for Maui and Prism, and that's going to be very, very interesting changes for what we're going to have to do, both for Shiny and for Prism.
I've had a lot of talks with Jonathan Dick, who's the lead on Maui.
Yep.
And they've got some interesting approaches. I have some ideas how I need to hook with them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they have to be a little bit disruptive in the space, so it's just something we need to deal with. It's probably far more painful for you guys because you need the named DI factory in place.
Mm-hmm.
I don't so much need that, but what I do is some magic on the iService collection to do stuff like what we were talking about with the key value store binding, which I can cover in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some magic I do behind the scenes there when you come to this part of your code. So I'll need to rethink how I'm doing that, basically. And I obviously don't want to be binding everybody's view models going through the same pipeline. So it's an interesting time, and I definitely need to figure out how not to break things with Maui.
Well, I think for like the bindings, right, like on your settings, you're just going to have to bite the bullet and add extension methods to do that.
Probably. But knock on wood, I've got a few ideas, and we'll see how it goes. Yeah, I don't really know what the right answer is there.
Okay.
Just we'll wait and see because they're still designing. So things could change. Who knows?
Oh, for sure. And they're doing a lot of stuff. Actually, I've been working with John Dick a little bit this week on the Zapium UI test framework that I've been putting together. So it's actually really good to have the Maui team helping out with that as well.
Yeah, so it's good to know. They're really working with the community right now on trying to get everything in place. They're listening. I do know that they've been asking a lot of questions of the community. So it's good to see them kind of out there actively participating with us and not just writing in behind closed doors.
Oh yeah.
Even though it's all open source, I mean, they're actively reaching out, which is kind of nice.
Mm-hmm. That is great for sure. It's not the same old Xamarin.
No, it's not so quiet and secretive, and at the same time, it's not as exciting because I remember the announcements we used to get at their Xamarin conference every year, and they used to have these big monolithic announcements. Now, most of those products that they made in those announcements are gone.
That's true.
Save Xamarin Forums, I guess. But it was always exciting going because they had some big. They reached, like Miguel and team really reached for the stars back then.
Well, I mean, you go back and I mean, like we can kind of discuss these things now in the open, right? Because while it was all NDA when they told us the MVP Summit at the last one that was actually in person, things, hot reload is a thing. Hot restart is a thing now, right? And, those were amazing things that the Xamarin team had been working on, and they worked on it for a long time in secret for the most part. But it can feel, I think, a little boring right now because they're just trying to get foundational pieces in place for Maui.
Yeah.
But what's exciting to me is, and I think you kind of feel this too, as an OSS author in the space, is there are certain challenges that we have as far as testing is concerned, whether it's UI testing, whether it's just unit testing on the platform. And these are kind of like things that they're recognizing in this Maui push that, hey, like this needs to be here from the start. Like we can't think about this a year from now. It's got to be now that we're thinking about it.
Yeah.
And so that's really exciting to see, at least to me, right? It might seem boring to some people, but it's good to see that we're going the right way from the beginning now.
Well, I think we get a lot more access to seeing what they're up to than probably a lot of people. So it's we don't get the big announcements anymore.
Yeah.
I do remember when Miguel he showed off Hot Restart back at that was pretty cool back then. I know a lot of us were kind of went crazy, and the code name was I don't know.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, Miguel. Sometimes I don't know if he's on some wild hallucinogenics or something these days, but
Baby Shark. Yeah.
Was it Baby Shark or was it that pineapple pen or
so
PPAP?
So Hot Reload was Baby Shark, and then the Hot Restart, which is your deploy from Visual Studio on Windows, that was the pineapple apple pen.
Yeah. I didn't know what that was until I looked up the video, and I was like, oh my God, what am I watching? It was pretty crazy. But it was really cool. That was the last time I was kind of excited about one of the major techs the Xamarin team was working on.
Awesome. Right. So we got secure settings. So show us a little bit about these secure settings. I know I'm happy about this.
So Dan, this was your request. I think you nagged me about this for a while.
Yeah, the issue was open for like a year and a half.
Oh, it wasn't that long. Depends. I moved it on you too, so we count from the one where I moved it, right?
Oh, okay.
But I wasn't sure. I honestly wasn't sure because secure settings and settings in general really were. I didn't need secure settings in anywhere in Shiny, but I did need settings. I just needed a setting store. So lo and behold, you kept bugging. Well, I want secure storage, because I want DI. So I had this interesting thing the one night. I mean, we're just binding key value stores. That's really all settings is. Mm-hmm. So I decided, just to show what settings was always doing, it was basically, I guess I'll bring in notify property changed and make this nice and ugly. So this is just basically a built-in Shiny view model. It doesn't do any Codegen stuff. Like if you want the magic, you can either use Dan's Prism, Magician, or reactive extensions to kind of make this all pretty. But for now, I'll just do string value. Let's be pretty about it. String value. Wow, my typing's great this morning.
You put a semicolon.
Yeah, there we go. All right, so let's do that. And we'll do this dot set ref this dot value and the new value coming in. So this will look pretty familiar to everybody. Oh, actually, let's make this nullable too. Let's go for the. So this is just kind of one of those general view model things that we have. So if you register this with your Shiny startup, which I'll do, singleton, and I'll just do, what did I call it? Secure settings. So what Shiny will do is say, oh, this is kind of a view model looking thing. This is kind of some of the magic that happens under the hood. It's going to go ahead and bind these out of, by default, the settings store. So it'll go in, if you've ever set this value, it'll go into the settings and go, oh, okay, sure, that was value from last time. So it's a way of persisting state across restarts and stuff. But in order to get your secure store, I had to introduce an attribute to get this to work, and that was what I call it, object binder. Let's do shiny.stores object store binder. So these are all strings right now because there's several different aliases in Shiny to bind these key values. So it's basically going to look, as this value changes, it's going to store it into, if you wanted to store it into a file, a JSON file, or the default settings. I have in memory if you're doing testing for whatever reason. But really, this was the one that Dan was after.
It's true. I was.
So with 2.0, basically, you can just mark this attribute, add it to your collection of services in Shiny, and any value now that you store here will end up in secure storage. So if you wanted to put this into like a username and password, if you wanted to store that, this will go into secure store with no magic. If I wanted to change this to memory, why you'd want memory, I don't know, but you could change that just like that.
Okay. And how do I find out the names of these different binders, by the way?
There is a property off of this. I am looking to make these a little bit more streamlined going forward. I just don't know what that looks like yet. But for now, what's the easiest way to show this? There is a service behind everything. No, that's not what I want. That's not what I want. I'm just going to think of how I want to resolve this. So probably be a really bad idea to call this your startup because Shiny Host isn't ready yet. But I'm just showing off what we want to get at. So it's I object finder. Shiny stores I object finder. So this is the guy behind the scenes doing all the lifting. Now this gets automatically injected into Shiny. So this isn't something that people often will look at ever. But if we do binder dot, what did I call it? Aliases. Find. Where did I put this stupid thing? This is the object binder. Key value store factory. Key value store factory. This is the one. So there is a factory called available stores, which says the strings that are available for this platform. Pretty much all of them are available. There's even a SQLite binder if you want it, which will store it in a SQLite database. And pretty much all of those stores are available across all the platforms, save UWP. UWP, their secure storage is all asynchronous for some stupid reason. So it's very hard to make it work with this mechanism. And I've been playing around with some ideas that just aren't honing out yet. So we'll probably end up coming back to it. But for now, like I said, it's supported everywhere. And for the platforms you care about, secure storage is there.
Yeah.
But this is a very complicated way of getting at the available stores.
So that was your subtle way of saying you don't care about UWP.
I don't care as much. It's certainly one that doesn't matter to me. It doesn't make me any money. I've had one customer in my entire career, since I started writing Shiny, I've had one customer ask about it. I've had many other people ask about it, but really only one customer asked about UWP, and it was in passing. And they basically said, should I care about it if we're doing this? And I said, no. Just do one.
Yeah.
So we'll see if maybe this evolves in WinUI. I don't know. I'm waiting that one out. My experiences with WinUI so far have been less than ideal, but I realize it's also not done. So I'm just waiting to see what happens.
Yeah, but you still get people that are like, well, where's the WinUI support? I'm like, they haven't finished. Come on now.
Yeah.
And nobody's paying me for anything like on it. It doesn't put food on my table. It doesn't pay my bills. It doesn't keep the lights on, the internet paid. So sorry, just not a priority to me.
And I don't know what'll happen. I mean, UWP was a flop. The Windows team has been actually pretty difficult to work with. I feel like they're not really listening, but I'm not really entwined in the Windows community. So maybe it's different for those that are. But I know when I've talked to them about some of the background stuff in BLE, they just had no interest in hearing it out. So, I go to those that are making the money, right?
For sure.
And that's how it goes. For
sure. Awesome. So we have the secure settings, which is fantastic. It's definitely one of my favorite features. What else have you done in 2.0? Is there anything else that we should kind of talk about or show off? Or
well, I did a lot around the BLE client stuff. There's a ton of stuff there, but that's like two of these presentations on their own. Because BLE is probably one of the most massive deliverables in Shiny.
Yeah, I do get a lot of people actually asking me about the Bluetooth. I think what it is you've developed this reputation of, unless Unless they're paying you for support, you're not going to support them.
Well,
And so they're like,
between
can
asking
you
a
talk to them?
question.
I'm like, nope.
There's a difference between asking a question and saying, here's all this 500 lines of code. What's wrong?
Yeah.
Or it doesn't work. Well,
Yeah.
what doesn't work? Can you tell me? Do you have a repro? And that's notoriously the problem with open source, is that people give you the bare minimum, or they email you directly instead of putting an issue in GitHub, right? And that's really the frustrating thing. Like, follow the GitHub template. Like, we're not here for support. We wrote a thing, people get value out of it, great.
Mhm.
But you have to, like, open source isn't, you're not the customer, you're a consumer.
Mhm.
I write it because I enjoy it and because I use it for my own customers. But yeah, I'm not going to walk people through on how to use reactive extensions or why I even use RX, because I know a lot of people question that.
Mhm.
And I use RX. I don't care if people don't like it or don't know how to use it. I'm going to die on that hill, because I know how to use it, and I know a lot of people think it's overcomplicated, but don't confuse complexity with power.
Yeah, it's really, it's a complexity in the sense that it's something else to learn, right? And
Yep.
like, this is kind of one of the things, like, I always talk to people about. If you're coming from somewhere else and you want to get into real good mobile development with Xamarin, it's like, yes, you do need to understand iOS, like the actual native platforms. Now, you don't need or the native APIs and kind of how they build apps. Do you need to be an expert on it? No, but you do need to understand it, right?
Yep.
Same with Android. You don't need to understand Java or Kotlin. You don't need to understand Swift. You don't need to understand Objective-C. You just need to know .NET, but you at least need to know the APIs
Yep.
and kind of their paradigms for what they're doing. And then you need to go and learn Xamarin Forms, right? And
Yep.
then, really, you want to go and learn Prism, which also means that you kind of need to figure out DI, because a lot of people hadn't come from a background. I mean, now with ASP.NET Core, you have DI, but definitely like like classic ASP.NET, you didn't necessarily have that. So it's like, you just start piling these things on. It is more to learn, but the quality of your code, and actually even the amount of code that you end up having to write, is a lot less.
Yes. There's actually one feature I did want to show. This is for all the people that don't like DI. So one of the biggest things with Shiny 2 was I didn't want to write those static classes. I know a lot of people like the static classing and they don't like DI. I don't really care. But in order to support, like, I still wanted to support those users, but supporting the static classes, because they don't have interfaces on static classes, I always found that I was behind, or that I wasn't updating them properly. So I got annoyed with static classes and I just stopped doing it. But in part of learning how I was going to do Codegen, I was like, what if I just generate static classes for people? And then this way I don't have to maintain them. I don't have to put them as part of the builds. If people want them, they can generate them where they want and change them however they see fit. So I added this attribute. All you basically need is this magic guy. For those that can't see it, unfortunately, it is just the Shiny package, which is new in the preview. And it's basically going to look at your library. It's going to look for this assembly attribute called generate static classes. You give it a namespace of what you want, and magically, I'm going to assume it's done that. You can see now all of these, app1.shiny accelerometer, because I've got the sensors package included. It's now there as a static class. So you can start doing when reading taken. And then you don't have to work with any DI if you don't want to.
Okay.
So that's one of the things I added for those that just, they want to work with static, and that's their choice. It's just not something that I wanted to support out of the gate or ever. But I can do this as a fun little thing, and so be it. Now you can have static classes.
So, I mean, this is kind of the inverse of like what Ryan Davis does with Xamarin Essentials. And like automatically generate. Well,
Essentially, I guess. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
he ended up writing interfaces for Essentials, correct?
Well, he has a tool that takes the like whatever release comes out, it scans the assembly and then generates the interfaces and an implementation class of that just calls, Xamarin Essentials, whatever.
Okay.
And then takes that and generates a NuGet.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So this would be the opposite of that. This is basically looking at the Shiny interfaces and generating static classes for them.
that's pretty awesome.
So nothing magic to it. It just,
I would never use the static, but yeah.
some people like it. I mean,
Yes, some people
you can't win the war. And like I said, for me, it was a fun learning experience on how to get, source generators working. It didn't take a lot of lifting to get it. And it kind of solved a problem where people were asking, well, why I don't want to use that. I just want to use static classes like Essentials. Fine. There you go.
Yeah.
And now I don't have to really support it to that, nth degree anymore. It just kind of, it's all unit tested. It generates what it needs to. And I don't have to support it beyond that.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So you have the Shiny package now. Is that responsible for all of my Codegen? So earlier you were showing us how you could Codegen your main activity, you're Codegenning your main application.
Yeah.
So is that the package that I need to bring in? Like if I want to do that, like this, it's that just Shiny. So it's not the Shiny core. So I do need to install this new package.
Yes. So this is new as of 2.0. It's not in release yet.
Okay.
But this brings in core, and this brings in all the source gen stuff that's in there. It'll bring in the generators to generate all of the stuff that you were looking at earlier with the app delegate and stuff.
Sounds good. Wow, there's a lot here for sure. And then you have, I think, a couple new push providers as well in 2.0, don't you?
I do. I've refined kind of push a little bit in 2.0, not a ton. It went a lot of under the hood changes and updates to try and make it work. Really, the two that I'm supporting out of the gate are Firebase messaging and Azure push notification hubs, and obviously the native, because really they all work off of the native platform. I'm working on one for AWS, and I have kind of one for OneSignal. The OneSignal API is a little bit difficult. They kind of hide a lot of stuff, but I'm looking for how to get that into Shiny as well. This was actually another one of your requests, Dan. You were the one that when App Center shut down, when they shut down their push notification provider, it sucked, right? And really a lot of people, I think, that were hoping that App Center was going to become the next Firebase were really let down by that. I know I had a customer that I had put on it, assuming that thing was going to go gold, and then it didn't. So one of the big problems with push was that we'd end up with some sort of custom interface or whatever the case may be. And it just really, when it came down to it, all these push providers worked the same. So it was time to build an abstraction that worked with all of them. Yeah. So I did that kind of in 1.2 of Shiny, but it wasn't something I had fully fleshed out, but now I have with 2.0. So let's take a look.
But I think one of my favorite things with the way that you have push implemented is realistically you can change providers if you want to, right? Like, I mean, or sometimes it may be a need to, right? So you were using you were using App Center, and they've announced, hey, we're not going to be doing this anymore, so you got to go find another provider. Well, now, the way that Shiny has set this up, you write your push delegate, and that remains intact. All of your business logic remains untouched throughout your entire app.
There's essentially nothing you need to change.
Yeah, I mean, it's one line that you change. So it's all in the registration here in the startup.
Yep.
Which is fantastic.
So right now I've just got two of the push providers installed. So I've got the native, which is always there, and it's looking for a push delegate, which we'll show in a second. And then I've put the Azure push notification hubs on here. Obviously, they need two extra things, which is the listener connection string and the hub name to get your Azure notification in there, or to get registered with Azure. But really, let's make our delegate, and I can kind of explain what's going on there. So my push delegate, public, my push delegate, and we'll implement that. So there's a couple things here. Token changed. This doesn't really happen other than with Firebase. Firebase tends to fire this on you, under the hood. This is necessary if you want your background, like maybe your server, to know how to push to a specific user or device. So you may inject like an HTTP client here to call your backend to say, user Allan, his push token is now this, if you wanted to send me a specific notification in the future. The on receive, this is the big guy. This is really the one that we care about. This is if you receive push data in the background. So you might have notification and data. This is just basically a read-only dictionary of strings. So you've got your key value. Whatever you want to do here, whatever data you push, the sky's the limit, right? You can send home an acknowledgement. I received message 1, 2, 3. Maybe I want to send some sort of custom notification. Who knows? Really, whatever you want to do here, this is where your app is going to be kicked to life. Maybe it's as simple as go get, because in this push notification data, you've got very tiny little bits of data. Maybe it's nothing more than to go get fresh data, right? So this is the big event. This is the one that really matters. But also there's the case of maybe I send out a push notification that actually kicks off a notification to the screen. And it might be as simple as getting a text reply or, do you want to go out for dinner, Dan? Yes or no? You could send that in a push note in the notification itself.
Is there beer involved?
Always, Dan. There's always
okay.
beer.
Then I'm always up for a beer.
So you could get here and see, did Dan reply with a get the hell out of here response? You can do text replies. You can see the action identifier. So was it a yes? Was it a no? And then maybe text is the reason. So that's all here. This is if basically you're tapping on a notification or replying to the notification. So you don't even need to hit the app. Like this wouldn't even load your app screen at all. This could happen all in the background without anything. Xamarin Essentials isn't, or Xamarin Forms isn't involved. And this is even, Prism's not loading. It's just purely background.
Definitely. So, one thing I will mention, so you were talking about like on token changed, notifying your backend and stuff. Just a pattern that I've used is, generally these different push mechanisms have some concept of tags, right?
Yep.
And so that's always a good one too, where you can add user tags where you can kind of identify a user in some fashion, where you can say, hey, it's, you probably don't want to use maybe you want to use their email, but you could use just a GUID or, whatever their user ID is. You can set that tag for them. And, that way, when you're doing that push, you can say, hey, push to Allan, and, whatever devices he has, we'll get it.
So, and it's interesting you mentioned that, because that's kind of one of the other it's in most of the providers now, is that tagging that you speak of. It's not in iOS. iOS is really the only one that doesn't have that out of the gate, but Firebase does. And I have the Firebase mechanism, which supports iOS as well. But it's also on Azure notification hubs. So the push manager, if the platform supports it, I actually have, so you can say, try to add a tag. So if the push manager supports it, you can try and add a tag here. You can check if the tag is supported. You can clear tags. You can get the current tags, etc. So it's all there. You can try to run them. If the platform doesn't support it for whatever reason, it just doesn't do it. but it's all there. It's all built in, and it's all safety. So if it doesn't support it, who cares? Just walk away and leave it.
Yeah. But again, I mean, these are just really great little things that you can do that, I mean, you've written your logic once like this. There's nothing here that says Firebase. There's nothing that that says Azure Notification Hub. So if you need to make that switch, make the switch. Who cares?
Yep. And it's all like just to show the difference. So there's the Azure one. And there's that one. And then the other one is use Firebase messaging, which also has no parameters. And that's it, right?
Yeah.
One line of code changes your push mechanism.
Yeah, the Firebase is more annoying because you have your Google Service Info plist on iOS and Google Services JSON.
Yeah, Firebase is a big pain in the ass to set up, that's for sure. Push in general, I think this was one of the big things is that you go through dealing with the code and then you go to deal with all the Firebase stuff and you're like, oh, this is brutal.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that Firebase is at the root of Android, so you have to do it one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you haven't set it up properly, you end up having to figure out why the configuration isn't working. Oh, you didn't have the Google build tasks installed. Who knows?
So Daniel's asking, do we have to override did receive remote notification, etc., and invoke the Shiny did receive in the app delegate, or does Shiny handle that when using services use Firebase?
So I probably missed the Codegen stuff we were talking about earlier.
I think he probably came in just after that. Yeah.
So as of Shiny 2.0, there is the library, this Shiny guy, if you can see it on my screen. Visual Studio doesn't get bigger. So this source generator looks at what NuGet packages from Shiny you've got installed and selectively generates this guy. So it's seen that I have, so this is the one that generated for this particular application. And it went through and it said, oh, I see you've got a push provider registered from Shiny. So it goes and generates all this stuff for you based on what NuGet packages are installed.
Yeah. So, and you've got the, hang on one second. So you've got the XF material init, iOS material init. Someone was not thinking with that name. I'm just saying that's so XF material.ios.material.
It is what it is, right? Somebody else is open. It's an actual amazing project for material pop-ups and stuff.
Yeah.
But I generate some of the third-party plugins.
So do you have like maybe a what do you call it? Like a list of, which third-party libraries you do actually support the code, like the init Codegen for?
Not yet. That'll be part of the docs when I actually finish those suckers.
What do you actually think about writing them? Gotcha.
I've been writing them. I'm using something called Static. If anybody knows that, that's an HTML. It's a fantastic library. So I've been learning how to write that and make it kind of design pretty. So I'm going through it. I am actually working on them quite actively. That's pretty much all that's in the way of releasing is getting some docs to explain how some of this stuff works under the hood. Because Codegen's a little bit mystical. It's a little bit magic. You don't see it happening. And the only reason that you're able to see this now is because I know how to generate them into a file. Otherwise, you'd never see this stuff, right? Like it just hides in the background and works magic without you ever seeing it.
Yeah. I wasn't a huge fan, actually, of how much they hid the source gen.
Well, I know they're supposed to be working on it so that you'll be able to see in your dependencies, you'll be able to see what package generated what code. I thought that was supposed to be part of 16.9, but maybe it's been pushed out.
Yeah, I know they've talked about, stuff, and they've done demos where, oh, yeah, see, it's all right here. And I'm writing generators. I'm like, where is it?
Yeah. It's tough. And the flags that they've got generated don't work quite the same in the Xamarin projects. They've got some kind of settings that you put in your CS proj.
Yeah.
But the path doesn't match where it should come out. So they're not fully baked is how I feel, but
for sure.
I know enough about how to work with them and see the outputs that we've gotten this far.
Well,
I've been able to get this far.
I mean, I think so little of how baked it is. I wrote an entire Codegen helper library just to make it easy to write the damn code.
Well, I know they've got some helper libraries out there that do it, but they're very, very, very verbose. Like it's almost bigger than just writing the string yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's testable. I don't know. But certainly when I saw yours, it was more fluent. It was more C# language than kind of these new keywords they introduced with Roslyn.
Mm-hmm.
But Roslyn's more of a compiler than it is like a C# language, so to speak. It's kind of really hard to describe unless you're working on these things.
Yeah, I mean, with Roslyn, you have to start understanding syntax trees and everything else, and it bloody makes my head hurt, man. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, and that's the thing. We're so used to working with types, and in there you're working with. It's not
symbols.
A type yet, right?
Yeah.
So you're working. You have to translate these terminologies back and forth. And you have to understand what types of symbols equal what C# wording. It's involved. It took quite a while to learn that stuff, but it's so powerful once you do.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I would have spent less time to learn, I don't know, Python or whatever.
Probably. But compilers they're an art form, right? Like that's why you go to school for those things for the most part.
No kidding. So so this configure log, that's new.
Yep. So this is the equivalent of the ASP.NET logging.
Mm-hmm.
This replaces Shiny had its own built-in logging, but it was a kind of a pain in the ass to maintain. And as new logging was coming or dependency injection, it kind of got hard to deal with all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure MAUI is bringing this stuff in. I haven't seen it yet, but I think it's coming.
Well, it's part of Host Builder, so the configure logging would be part of the Host Builder.
I think right now the problem is it's not super optimized. There is a kind of a heavy cost to pay to get logging. It's quite a big beast, but again, Shiny wasn't designed to just be for your typical Hello World app. It was designed for the bigger apps. Mm-hmm. So I don't mind paying this price to get like an actual proper logging mechanism, knowing that they're actually working on optimizing this right now for mobile. So .NET 6 is going to be a big, it's a big update, right? Like they're gonna bring all of these optimized things for the Xamarin platforms.
In theory, yes.
Yes, in theory. Yeah. I'm actually quite hopeful for it. The focus really is on MAUI right now, I feel, with .NET 6. So
definitely.
I think we're going to get the things that we need for true cross-platform .NET.
Yeah, I mean, I think one area that it gets a little interesting is, like, we all like to complain about how secretive Microsoft always used to be, right? We have no idea what they're doing, and all of a sudden they come out with something. Now, you kind of have like this inverse problem. They're doing everything in the open, and because they're doing everything in the open, like, the MAUI team can't actually do certain things until the .NET team like merges their PRs and has a release generally available, because they can't get it any sooner than you or I can.
Yep. It's I don't know. It's a lot of moving parts. It's a challenge for them for sure. But I'm pretty hopeful that we're going to get a lot of those things that we need for mobile and .NET 6.
Yeah.
That being said, the logging builders, there's nothing really there, right? Like, we don't have these integrations with stuff that we're used to, like App Center and Firebase is another big one, Firebase Analytics. So with 2.0, because I took this on, I still needed App Center. There was a couple out there. I wasn't sure what their support level was going to be. And I didn't see one other than a plugin for Firebase Analytics. So I needed to get something integrated with this platform. So I just wrote one for Firebase and one for App Center. But now I can do add App Center. pass in your App Center secret, and now you've got App Center logging, and you've got the iLogger, whatever it is that they use, dependency injected for you.
Now, let me ask you this. Do you do any checking on that string to see like, hey, is this null or empty? So like, I mean, you know me, I'm always using my mobile build tools because I wrote it so I could use it, right?
Yep.
And one of the cool features in Mobile Build Tools 2.0 is that you can actually specify a default value, and you can say, hey, like I want this to be like null or default, which I mean, no matter what, it generates as the default for that type. So that's gonna,
I don't have an empty argument, but I need to. And there's a reason I need to, is because basically what you just said, you can pass null for this. And the reasoning for doing that is maybe you need to initialize App Center different, or maybe you're using other parts of App Center. Basically, I only initialize the Crashlytics and what's the other one they call it? Event logging.
Yeah.
So if you pass the app secret, I'll do that for you. If you don't, I just skip it. I don't initialize App Center because I'm assuming you've done that already. It is missing the null argument. Basically, I'm going to add something that says that you don't have to pass anything. But that'll answer your question.
Yeah, well, I mean, like the big thing is like in local development, a lot of times I don't pass an argument because I don't want everything I'm doing. I know I'm going to crash it. Like, hey, it's development. We crash it all the time. You know? It's part of development. So I never send anything up, but you know, it's always helpful if I don't have to wrap that in like a, you know, if not debug or whatever. Yeah.
No, you don't like. I don't know why you hate compiler flags, man. They're beautiful.
I do use them when I need to, is the short answer. I just like to not have to do that. That way, you know, any variables I can take out between local debugging and actual releases is just helpful in my opinion.
Fair enough.
You know, it's even something where things like hot reload, as awesome of a tool as it is, one of the things I hate about it is because it so significantly changes, like because I can't do the you know, link out, you know, all the SDK assemblies and stuff like that. Now I have this difference between what I'm testing locally and my release build, and then you get all the linker issues, and you're like, oh crap, you know, now I look like an idiot because, you know, it worked fine on my machine, but the CI build is broken.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and that's fair.
Yeah.
But so like I said, this does take the null. I'm going to actually make that argument null just based on your feedback right on the live stream, Dan. Because I skip it if it's null. I don't skip App Center because, yeah, maybe you want to initialize it yourself for whatever reason. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Adam was asking, did I miss an announcement of Shiny 2.0? Allan, just say the phrase.
No, there's no official announcement yet. Because
the announcement is that there's been a preview for 6 months.
Yeah, but there's been a lot of changes in that 6 months.
There has.
So it's basically at the state where I feel it's done. Now I'm just working on docs and a blog post and kind of the right opportunity to make the announcement official. But it's pretty much there. I feel pretty good about the platform now.
Yeah. Did you get the Idiot's Guide how to write a blog that I sent you the link for?
Yeah, it's very helpful, Dan. Very helpful.
Good.
I think, Dan, you should write the blog post for the release. How about that?
I kind of already did write one for your release.
Oh, you write it for the key value stores. You write it for the stuff you care about.
Well, of course.
You're the only one that cares about. I guarantee on the release you'll be the only one that cares about that feature for first. Although I'm using it. To be fair, I'm using it. So
yeah, I mean, it really is helpful. You know, so like, I mean, even the app I'm working on right now, I'm already using it. It just happened to work out really well because the app that we're doing, we have totally custom authentication in this app. And so it's not like I am using something like MSAL that has, you know, all of that kind of already sorted out where they're handling it. So it just makes it really simple that, you know, I can toss the JWT in this settings class that's using the secure store, And now I don't have to worry about it. It's super simple and it's very testable all the way through.
Yep. Fair enough. But you're still going to be you and I will be the only one using it at first.
Yeah, that's okay. So I know 2 years from now, people will be like, oh my God, I just found your blog post that you wrote about it. And, this is amazing. I'm like, yeah, I wrote it 2 years ago.
And by then all these libraries will be old.
That's right.
All right.
Awesome.
What else? I think, like I said, Bluetooth LE is a big one.
Definitely.
What
did you do? You did some stuff, I think, as well with like GPS and motion. Weren't there some changes in that from 1 to 2?
Not really.
Okay.
Internally, it's changed because everything's Android X now. The entire I'm not supporting old Android, so be prepared for that. It's only Android X going forward. And with that, a lot of, I guess, the core, the underlying frameworks that's driving it's changed. Everything's a foreground service now.
Well, that's just in time for Android 30 or 11, whatever. Yeah. I always hate the Android naming, right? Because you have like the SDK level, and then you have like I don't know.
Yeah, I have a chart that I have to look at because I always forget the API level versus the OS version. Isn't it Android 12? It's Android 12 that's launching, right? I don't know.
I think they're coming out with Android 12 this year, but
yeah,
like Android 11, I think came out last year, but nobody gave a what. And then, like just recently, in like the last maybe month or two, the Xamarin team finally added support for it.
Oh, I see. The OS versions don't really make a difference to the Xamarin community as much anymore, other than the flip to Android X.
That was a big one. That was a painful one.
It was a painful one, but it didn't go as bad as I thought it was going to go. But it was still a painful lift. But that's also why I'm not supporting the old support libs anymore. It's Android X or bust at this point.
And honestly, like the Android X, that's exactly why I'm like, I can't use 1.2. Like I'm using 2.0 because I need this to work. I'm not dealing with the headache of Android support libs and Android X, and I don't got time for that.
Yep, it's a bit of a hassle, and it needs to happen. Like the community needs to shift because Forms already has, right? So,
those were some. That was a fun PR for Shane. He was not happy.
Well, yeah, it was a lot of work, but we're better off for it. Android X, in my opinion, still isn't much better than the support libs. We've got the same mess and hodgepodge with them, but it is the future. It's where we're at. So anyhow, that's all I'm dealing with going forward. But also with that, now Shiny is able to kind of move forward. And in terms of location, kind of getting back to your question on location, it's all under the hood stuff that's changed. So geofencing, if you've got Google Play services installed, which it turns out a lot of devices don't, it'll use the Google Play services version. Otherwise, it'll flip over to the native one or the OS one, which isn't quite as good. So that's under the hood. It just kind of flips a switch. And it uses the foreground servicing as part of Android. Basically, all that is a service that runs with your app, but it puts a notification up so that your users, your end users, can actually see, okay, your app is doing something. It took a while to figure out if this was something I wanted to do, but the fact is that most of the people using Shiny, including myself, for GPS in the background, or even beacons is a big one. It needs to be running full tilt. Like it's not, don't tell me periodically, how these things are happening. I want to know in real time. Do you see a beacon? Did my GPS position change?
Yeah.
Show it to me like right now. I don't want to wait. And the fact is with those background, like full background, no notification, it's extremely throttled and people don't seem to understand that. So bringing the foreground servicing was a big upgrade as part of this. But that's all native. You get that with Shiny. You don't have to do anything. It's just there.
That's fantastic. Well, awesome. I don't know if there was anything else that you wanted to cover. I mean, I know we covered a lot. There's definitely the question of, when does all of this come out? Are we thinking June?
I'm thinking as soon as
soon?
I can blog post and docs. I need to have some sort of docs out of the hood.
So what,
so that's all
what
I'm
you're
working
saying
on.
is we need to get people over to your GitHub sponsors page, and that way they can properly motivate you by, buying you beer via sponsorship.
Sure.
Okay?
That always works too. Keeps me motivated.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, thank you for joining me, Allan.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
I appreciate it. We'll have to do something on the Bluetooth, so we'll chat a little bit offline and figure that out.
Yep.
I know we've already kind of had a couple of conversations of what that might look like, but we'll figure that out and set up something that we can do that. Definitely seems like it'd be kind of fun to do. So.
For sure. The Bluetooth is a big deliverable. So definitely a full stream on that guy.
Yeah. And I know I've had a lot of people asking questions on that. So Almir, hello. And thank you for tuning in. Anyway, well, with that, guys, thank you so much for joining today. Hope you have enjoyed this, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Hey, Dan, we're still live.